Well, hello there. Welcome to our next amazing edition of Model Building Start to Finish. This is John sitting with
Dan.
And we're still at it with this SD40-2.
Yep.
I'm going to say something else here in a second, Dan, but tell us what we're working on this week. And
Okay. Well, this week I'm going to work on the stuff that's underneath the sill, which is the air reservoirs and air filters and some plumbing.
Okay.
And the bell.
Excellent. And I wanted to point out that we got a gray background to work on now.
Yeah.
And it'll make things a lot easier to see.
Yeah.
This was due to some suggestions by people, and it's something that I've known actually all along that we should have done, but just never really got around to it. I was just trying to use what we had. So, but I've got to say, it looks a whole lot better, Dan.
Yeah, especially with a black locomotive.
That was the problem. So,
Yeah.
so instead of black on black, we have something with mixed colors on gray, and this should work out a lot better.
Yeah. So this is Details West set number 304, and it has 2 air reservoirs and some piping. So I'm going to use the air reservoirs first and then kind of worry about the plumbing second. So these air reservoirs need a little bit of preparation before they can be used. And one of the things you need to do is to drill through the ends. There's little indentations on each end where the piping goes in.
Oh, that makes it easier to tell, huh?
Yeah.
Where?
And this is the new version of these tanks, which actually has the moisture ejector
it's pre-attached, yeah.
Pre-attached, and also the mounting brackets pre-attached. It used to be you had to drill holes for all of these things and glue them on yourself.
Yeah, I remember the moisture ejectors were things that you used to put on during our weathering and detailing diesel locomotives videos.
Well, they do actually still sell these as separate parts if you had like a plastic tank that didn't have it on it.
Mm-hmm.
But these already have it mounted. So
yeah, that's really cool.
I'm using a number 70 drill bit, and I'm just going to put it in the little indentation in the middle and then just drill in a little bit. So I have enough room to put some piping in. So these tanks have this little nub on one end, and I'm not sure what that's for. Maybe some engines have a fitting there. Mine doesn't. And I think because of the orientation of the tanks on my model, this probably won't show, but I'm going to file it off anyway.
Oh.
Just to make sure.
So you checked the photos, though, and didn't see it?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not there.
Yeah, so it's safe to file it.
Yeah. So this particular tank isn't too bad, but a lot of times they have some flash along the mold seam here.
Right.
So I'm just going to use a file to knock some of that off. So now that I've done some filing, I have some 320 grit paper. I'll use that first just to smooth it out. One thing I try to be careful of is there's these little seams at the end of the tank, and those are supposed to be there, so I'm trying not to sand those off.
Yeah, don't file everything.
Yeah.
So you said specifically that you're using 320. Are you going to go to a 400 after that?
I'll go to a 400, and that should be good enough.
Okay, well, we'll come back when the sanding is done, because it's probably boring to watch.
Yeah, this isn't that exciting.
Yeah, every iteration of sandpaper.
Yeah. Now that I've got the tank sanded, I need to figure out where it goes. And I've been looking at prototype photos on the engineer side, which is what we're looking at here.
Mm-hmm.
And something on the model or the tank is slightly off because no matter where I put it, it's not exactly right.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah. In terms of like where the tank starts and where it ends, I'm looking at the handrail stanchion mounts and the fuel tank and everything. So anyway, this is probably the best compromise I can come up with that looks pretty much like the real one.
Right.
So I've just kind of set the tank here, and what I'm going to do is to make a couple of pencil marks around where the mounting pins go, just as kind of a way so I'll remember about where, whoops, it just fell in, but that's okay, that doesn't matter.
About where it's going to be is what you're going to say.
Right, because I know that I need to drill between these lines.
Oh, so you have to drill holes for the pins to go in.
I need to drill underneath.
Got
it. I'm marking it here so I can have the model sort of assembled while I'm positioning the tank.
Right.
The underside of the sill isn't quite even. There's a lip on the edge.
Right.
So I cut a couple of scrap pieces of O20 styrene, and I'm using those as shims.
And what's the purpose of that?
The purpose of that is to provide a more even mounting surface for the tank.
Oh, so you're going to put these shims in each place where you're going to drill the holes for the pins on the tank?
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
So I'm going to use some liquid styrene cement to secure these. If I can keep it in place for
that's
2
always,
seconds.
That's always a problem, isn't it?
Yeah. There we go.
So this is that plastic welding stuff?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a really good bond. So just press it in. So make sure it's nice and glued. I can do the other one.
So you're using the pencil marks to see where to put those two?
Right. I actually give John credit for this idea. But basically to use the same trick that I used on the snowplow, and that's to put a little drop of paint on each of the mounting pins and then use that to mark where I need to drill.
Perfect.
And the idea is that the tank should more or less be flush with the edge of the sill. So when it's mounted, that's how it hopefully will end up. So I'm using a number 67 bit. And because I'm going to use a walkway tread kit, I'm not worried about drilling through the sill.
Oh, because it'll cover it, huh?
Right. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to do what I just did and penetrate the top of the walkway.
So what you just have to drill each of those little paint dots out, and then the thing will stick right in there?
Right, it should. I'm going to check it anyway just to make sure before I drill the second hole.
Looks like it.
Yeah. So after test fitting the tank, I noticed that it was seated a little bit crooked. And it's because even though I put shims under there, the mounting surface is still not quite even. So I'm going to file just a couple of nubs on those mounts. I'm going to file just the ones on the outside a little bit.
Oh, and that'll make it sit closer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that I've got the tank test fit and I know that it's going to work right, I'm going to use some CA glue on these pins.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And then put them inside the holes. Just press it in. The mounting pins do stick up a little bit through the walkway, so I'm going to file that down. And again, because this is going to be covered, I'm not too worried about what it looks like right now.
Would it be possible just to nip it off with some wire cutters? Can you get close enough?
Possible, but yeah, it's hard to get close enough when this thing is so short.
Yeah.
And this is soft metal. It files really easily. I'm doing basically the same thing on the other side. And again, this is a bit of a compromise because it doesn't
match the photos, huh?
I can't make it match exactly because some length of something is off somewhere. One of the things to note about this is on this side, the moisture ejector is actually in the front, which is kind of unusual, but I've noticed that on some of these Santa Fe SD40-2s.
Okay.
So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to mark the location just like I did on the other side.
So you'll make the little white platforms and mark it all the same? Okay.
The main difference on this side, they're going to be deeper because of this blower duct here, so there's more space to fill. Like I said before, the indentation on this side's a lot deeper, so I used a piece of 040 and 080 styrene laminated together to make the filler. And just again gluing it in with some liquid styrene cement.
So really the only thing we're looking at here is the fact that the pieces there are thicker, right?
Right.
The rest of the process is exactly the same?
Exactly the same. It's just the the difference in height. The one thing I should mention is that I already checked with the chassis on the body to make sure that putting this stuff here wasn't going to interfere with anything.
Yeah, you did that on the other side too.
Yeah. So I already figured that out. There's no part of the chassis that's going to hit this stuff and prevent the shell from going back together properly.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of on this side that might be different is that because these supports are thicker, those little tabs probably won't go through the sill on the top.
No, you don't have to drill in as far.
Yeah.
Although, again, it doesn't really matter because we're going to cover it.
Well, I'm just thinking you won't have to file those little buttons off the top. Right.
This is Details West Part 226, which is a set of Salem air dryer filters. and it has a big one and two smaller ones. Now, one thing about details like this is that even on the same engine, they can change over time.
Oh, so you have to pick an era, huh?
Yeah, and I've seen pictures of this engine as I couldn't find any pictures of it as a Santa Fe engine from an angle where I could see the fireman's side very well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a bit of a guess, but I saw this style of filter on the BNSF engine that this engine turned into in 2003, and then it wasn't there in 2006, but it was back again in like 2012 or 2013. So I'm going to go with this. Okay. And we're going to hope it's right.
Well, if it isn't, you could just say it was for a different month.
Yeah.
Of whatever year you're modeling.
Yeah. Just like the air tank, these have some holes that need to be drilled, and they're dimpled. There's one on this side and one on the other side.
It's nice that they model the holes in, or the areas where you need to drill like that.
Yeah, so I'm using a number 72 bit here, and I'm just going to drill in a little bit so that there's something to stick a pipe into.
Right, so you're just doing like a pinhole, right? You're not drilling it all the way through. That might be worth mentioning.
No, there are times when I do actually drill them all the way through, but I don't think I'm going to do that in this case. I just want to have enough of a hole that whatever I put in there will have enough gluing surface to stick. I had to make a mount for the larger air dryer, and I did the same thing where I laminated some styrene, and then I put another couple pieces on top of that to make a bracket that looks something like what I see in photos. And this top piece is just a little strip of 040 by 080 styrene with a little piece of 022 by 090 on top of it.
Yeah, so you're really just piecing stuff together, huh?
Yeah, I don't know that it's exactly like what's really on the thing, but it looks fairly close.
Uh-huh.
And then I drilled a little hole in it, and that's where the mounting pin from the air dryer will go. There's actually quite a bit of excess mounting pin, and as you can see, it flares out on the top of the air dryer.
It's like the opposite of what it should do, huh?
Yeah, so I'm just going to cut it back to about here where it's straight. This is the front part of the filter, and I've glued a short piece of 019 brass wire into the hole that I drilled earlier.
So is that a pipe that comes out of it or simulated?
Yeah, this is very close to the air reservoir, and there's a pipe that connects the two.
Oh, I see. So it's going to go into the hole that's in the air reservoir, and
right.
The other one's going to go into the hole that you made for the pin?
Right. So this is a little tricky because you got to get both of these holes in at the same time, and they're pointed in different directions.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit tricky, but
we're going to try it.
Yeah, it can be done. I test fit it actually, so I know it's going to work. But
the magic of off camera.
Yeah. So I'm using some CA glue again, and let's put a little drop on each of those.
It went right in.
Yeah.
So the trick was to put it into the air reservoir first and then push down on the other hole. Cool.
Yeah. So I mounted the little air filter or air dryer part, and I ended up actually having to move it slightly forward, which isn't exactly the way it is on the real engine. But when I originally put it in, there was a slight gap between the back of the tank and the filter. And the problem is I did a little test. I put one of the side frames on the model temporarily and tried to turn the wheels, and it was hitting this part.
Oh, that's not good. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the kind of stuff you encounter sometimes when you're doing this kind of work to a model. So I moved it as far forward as I could make it go, basically so that the filter is butting up right against the end of the tank.
Which is prototypically inaccurate, isn't it?
Slightly, but it's one of those little things. Sometimes you have to make compromises in model railroading, and This is one of those times. The other thing I had to do was to knock off a slight bit of the detail on this part in the back. It's basically kind of like 3 cylinders. There's one in front here, and then there's 2 here. And there's these little projections that extend down. And I filed the back one off because that was, even with the tank or the filter moved, it was still hitting the truck side frame. So by filing this a little bit, I was able to get enough clearance that now the model should go around curves without hitting anything. So to complete the undersill detailing on the fireman's side, I've added a couple more supports here and here. These are just some more pieces of 040 styrene that I laminated together. And this one in the front is going to support the bell, and the one in the back is going to support some piping that comes and connects with this part. So for the bell, I'm going to drill a 1/16 hole because I'm using a Details West bell casting, and it has a shaft on it that is about that size. And the hole needs to be pretty much even with the edge of the blower duct.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So right about here and right toward the edge so that it's not quite on the black part of the shell, but close.
Uh-huh.
So right about here.
Got to be able to see it from the side, I guess.
Right, and you don't want to mount it too far inboard because then it would interfere. In fact, I am going to have to make a couple little modifications to the chassis because otherwise this stuff is going to be in the way. But we'll do that later. So as it turns out, the hole I drilled is just a little too small. So I'm going to ream it out just by running an X-Acto blade around the edges a little bit. Now that that's done, I can glue the bell in.
Are you using CA glue again?
Yeah. Next, I've got this little tiny piece of piping that came with the air reservoir kit, and I'm going to insert that into the hole that I drilled in the front of this air reservoir. So the last piece is this little pipe elbow, which sticks into the hole in the back of this part. This is actually kind of looped around in a little U shape, but I bent it straight because it looks more like the pipe I need in the photos. So what I need to do is drill a hole in this block so that I can turn this and have this part go into the block because it's supposed to
I see.
Go down, not in like this.
Yeah, and that's the support you just added, right, that we talked about? Yeah.
So I need to kind of use this as a guide to where to position the drill. I marked one line, which is the center line from here, so that I know where to position the hole this way. And then I know I need to position the hole between these two marks, front to back.
Yeah, you got to be pretty careful doing this, huh?
Yeah, well, you want to get it in the right place so that it's not, out of alignment. You're viewing it only from the side, so if it was slightly canted inward or something, it's not like you'd notice probably, but I still like to get it right.
I would think there's some margin for error, too, because you could stick it a little bit further into the hole or maybe cut a tiny bit off of one of the ends or the other. I mean, there's a lot of play, I think, or it seems like there should be, right?
Yeah. So it took a little finagling, but I finally managed to get the pipe inserted into both holes and glued. And this is what it looks like.
So you use CA glue for that too?
Yes. Usually any type of plastic to metal or metal to metal, I use CA. Okay, so moving on to the engineer side. All I've done for the rear of the tank on this side is to make a little Z-bend with a piece of 019 brass wire. And one end of this goes in to the air reservoir. The other end just basically just glues to the bottom of the sill. So the two small air filters also need to have holes drilled in them. I'm using a number 76 drill bit, and there are little indentations.
Oh, how helpful.
Yeah. So now this is one case where I'm actually going to try to drill all the way through it. Ooh. And there's a trick to that. One is you want to get going so that your drilling as straight into the thing as possible. So you're trying to point the drill at the hole on the opposite side.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you got to check yourself and make sure you're not drilling it crooked like I'm starting to here.
That would be me. I'd drill it all sideways.
Yeah. And the thing is to drill part way into it.
Okay.
And then flip it over.
Oh, and then connect it from the other side.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because usually they'll meet in the middle on their own.
Uh-huh.
If
or
you
close enough,
yeah.
Right?
If you try to just drill all the way through from one side, unless you've got really good aim, the hole usually ends up somewhere you don't want it. The other thing is try to preserve this little pin thing that's sticking up out of the top because that's going to be used to mount it. So to mount these smaller filters, I've made a couple of pencil marks after studying photos to figure out where they're supposed to go. And they're mounted a little bit staggered. One's a little bit further out toward the edge of the engine, and one's a little closer to the center. And they're also spaced. One's a little closer to the front, and one's a little further back.
So you've actually marked that on the black plastic, right?
Yeah, with a
Okay.
pencil. It's hard to see, but it is there.
Yeah.
And one is basically right underneath the handrail stanchion mount. And I'm just going to drill right through because, again, we're putting that walkway tread on this later, and this is all going to be covered.
Right.
And then the other one is right about here.
So you're basically just trying to use the reference photos to get the best estimate of where the thing is, basically?
Right.
Yeah.
It's really hard with this stuff because, you know, this stuff's always in shadow, and a lot of times it's small in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to pinpoint exactly where it goes can be difficult. So what I did is to create a piece of pipe from some 019 brass wire, and I threaded that through the hole that I drilled in the filter.
Right.
And I also added a little mounting block of a single piece of 040 styrene for this inner filter, the one that's closer to the center of the engine.
Oh, right.
Because I thought it was a little bit too high. So this will make it stick down just a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So the stem on the filter that I said not to cut off earlier goes in this hole. So I'll put a little dab of glue on the hole in the air reservoir. CA glue again. And this brass wire isn't glued to the filter itself yet.
Oh, so you have some play in it, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stick that in there.
Oh, yeah. Look at that.
And then I can just use my little makeshift glue applicator.
Also known as the brass wire trick.
Yeah, to add some glue
Yeah.
on either end. And then I can just use a little tiny corner of a paper towel to mop up excess.
Yeah, because that'll create a blob, won't it?
Yeah, it can.
Yeah.
So you don't need that much glue. Okay, so I've made another piece of wire and threaded it through the other filter. And I have to confess, I'm not really sure if this is at all accurate.
Uh-oh.
Because, I don't know, I don't have an SD40-2 that I can readily go look at, you know, and crawl around on. And trying to see this stuff in photos when it's usually in shadow and usually very small in the photo is really difficult. So consider this an approximation. I've drilled a couple more holes where this wire is going to fit through the walkway. And just, I'm going to have to, this one is going to be too long. I'll have to trim it later. But
Would you like trim it off of the walkway itself, or do you?
yeah, I'll use some flush cutters and then file it down.
I can see where this is hard because that little filter is basically riding on this pipe.
Right.
That's a pain.
Yeah, and then this other.
I could totally see getting frustrated with this if I were trying to do it.
So something like that. I just
Yeah.
need to glue it.
Wow, you weren't kidding. It's really sticking up there.
Yeah, so that's what flush cutters are for.
Uh-huh. And then you have to file that tiny, tiny nub that's still there left
Right,
over?
I'll file that down. So as you can see, there's little shiny spots where various pieces of metal came through holes and were filed down.
Right. But one more reminder, though, and this is probably going to be in the next chapter, we're going to cover all that, right?
Right, so it really doesn't matter. All that matters is that it's filed down so it doesn't stick up and interfere with the walkway tread that I'm going to put on the model later.
Right. Now, here's a question, though. Did that already have molded walkway tread on it?
No, this is just smooth.
And it came that way, too?
Yeah.
So, theoretically, say you weren't going to put the walkway tread on. If you painted that, would it look all right?
I would probably want to use some filler on it.
Yeah. Or something. I think walkway tread's a better way to go.
Yeah. The last thing I'm going to do is to drill a little hole right here so I can put a little hook. And that's going to be for later on when I add a brake chain.
Oh, I see.
Right now I'm just going to put the hook in there.
See, now, but this is the fireman's side again, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
We're back on the other side. I could have done this earlier, but well, I'm doing it now. So I'm just going to drill part way in here. Okay, so I've used a little piece of 010 wire to make a little hook. I'll put a little glue on the hole.
Oh my God, that is so small.
It's really tiny.
It's hard to even see.
Yeah, but that'll be enough to hook the chain over later. I ran into a little bit of a snag when I tried to put the shell back on the body. and that is that some of these parts are in the way and they make contact with the frame. So I'm going to have to do just a little bit of cutting on the frame in order to make some clearance. And I've used a screwdriver to kind of scratch in where I need to remove material. But it's basically this corner here, this corner here, this corner here, and this corner here.
And that's so that the shelf fits on, or what?
Yeah, because, well, remember we added detail under the sill, like the bell and some of those other little pieces of plumbing that stick down.
Right.
And they would hit this. And you wouldn't be able to put this back in. Now, it really would have been better for me to figure this out sooner when I was doing other cutting on the frame. So one of the things I did, as you can see, I've removed the trucks so that when I grind on here, I don't get any metal shavings into the gears.
Yeah.
Now, this has a can motor that's pretty well sealed, so I don't think I need to worry about that too much. But if you had an open frame motor, you'd certainly want to either remove that or tape over it. So
very thoroughly.
Right. So you don't want to get any metal shavings in any of the moving parts.
Okay.
So as you can see, everything fit back together now with the modifications to the chassis.
It's looking a lot more finished now, too.
Yeah. And the stuff under the sill is making it look nice and busy. And even though a lot of that's going to get painted black or dark blue and won't be all that visible, it's still having all the detail really adds something to the model, I think.
Yeah, you'll see it. All right. Well, it was a long chapter, Dan, but got a lot of detailing done.
Yeah.
And we'll be back again with our next episode. So we'll see everybody then.
Okay.